up on this Monday edition of Newsline at noon. South Korea's defense minister convenes a meeting of army commanders to devise measures to counter drones sent by North Korea. Chief nuclear negotiators from South Korea, the U.S., and Japan are in Washington for talks on North Korea as Pyongyang threatens a new nuclear test. Plus, Korean rhythmic gymnast Son Yeon-jae makes history, bringing home 4 gold medals from the Gymnastics World Cup in Lisbon. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. Thanks for joining us. You're watching Newsline at noon. I'm Ojin-ju in Seoul.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this lunchtime, South Korea is on an alert after the military discovered yet another suspected North Korean drone on a mountain in Gangwon-do province, some 130 kilometers south of the inter-Korean border.
We have our Kim Hyun-bin standing by at the Ministry of National Defense in Seoul. So, Hyun-bin, it must be very concerning that this is the 3rd drone found on South Korean territory in a matter of weeks. What countermeasures does Seoul plan to take?
Hey guys, the Defense Minister announced a little over an hour ago that their key commanders for every military branch held an emergency meeting to discuss the recent drone infiltration. Defense Minister Kim Kwang-jin, who led the meeting, urged all facets of the military to maintain flawless operation readiness in regards to the suspected North Korean drones and other threats from Pyongyang. Kim emphasized that the 3 drones found in South Korea in recent days were for surveillance purposes, but in the future, they could be used for terror attack purposes. The ministry says if the drones are confirmed to have come from the north, Pyongyang is in clear violation of Korea's armistice agreement, as well as an international agreement on flying over another country's airspace without prior notification.
So, what are some of the military's plans to prevent such incidents from happening again?
Well, North Korea has hundreds of drones or unmanned aerial vehicles in its arsenal, so there could be more found in the coming days or weeks. The South Korean military says it's well equipped to deal with enemy jet incursions and attack UAVs, but it's much more difficult detecting these kind of ultra-small sized UAVs. Seoul says it plans to purchase low-altitude radars as soon as possible and other military gadgetry to prevent further infiltrations. Seoul's Joint Chief of Staff said it will take strong actions over Pyongyang's violation of its airspace and will also mobilize units across the country to search for other drones. The ministry says it will continue to evaluate possible routes and the damage the UAVs could cause, while enhancing air defense operations system to better counter small-sized UAV infiltration.
And Hyun-bin, so what do we know about the discovery of this 3rd drone on Sunday?
Well, the ministry announced on Sunday that while ginseng digger first spotted the UAV last October, and on a mountain in Samcheok, Gangwon province, and after that, it reported to the military officials last Friday. Initial investigations show the drone is the same model as the one that crashed in Paju late last month. Preliminary analysis also shows the computer components inside the drone contain chips and microprocessors released back in the early 1990s, but have long been obsolete. As you said, this is the 3rd discovery like this, and it is a worry as the South Korean military failed to detect these ones until they crashed on South Korean soil. There were almost certainly many more that made the flight, but made it back to the north safely. Back to you guys.
Well, you're certainly right, Hyun-bin. It is a worry that all these drones seem to be coming into South Korean territory now. And that was our Defense Ministry correspondent Kim Hyun-bin reporting about Seoul's future plans to counter these small-sized drones. This after a third suspected North Korean drone was found more than 100 kilometers south of the inter-Korean border.
Now, President Park Geun-hye says South Korea needs to come up with a contingency plan that addresses any type of provocation from North Korea. Speaking at a meeting with her chief secretaries on Monday morning, President Park said North Korea's string of ballistic missile launches and its strengthened surveillance techniques need to be taken seriously. She called on her officials to come up with a plan of action sooner rather than later. The sense of urgency, she said, was due to public fear over the continued threats and provocations. South Korea, the United States, and Japan will hold a meeting of their top nuclear negotiators in Washington on this Monday. Upon his arrival to the U.S. Capitol, Seoul's nuclear envoy also hinted about holding separate bilateral talks with his Japanese counterpart. Shin Se-min reports.
The newly appointed South Korean envoy to the six-party talks, Hwang Jun-guk, is in the U.S. Capitol for talks with his American and Japanese counterparts on drawing up countermeasures and preventive steps to deal with North Korea's latest provocations. According to South Korean officials, Hwang is scheduled to meet with Washington Special Envoy Glenn Davies and Japanese Foreign Ministry Director General Junichi Hara on Monday. Speaking to reporters upon his arrival in Washington, Hwang said the talks are designed to reaffirm coordination among the three nations in regards to further provocative acts by North Korea. The South Korean officials also hinted that there might be a chance for a bilateral meeting with Tokyo's chief nuclear envoy, something that didn't happen the last time the three countries met in this format last November. If the meeting is held, it'll reflect South Korea's push for strengthening security partnership with Japan, despite a number of unsolved territorial and historical disputes. Hwang said it would be, quote, unnatural for the nuclear envoys of neighboring countries not to meet. Any talks that might occur would center on the North Korean nuclear threat, and Hwang said Seoul could not rule out the possibility that Pyongyang will make good on its threat to conduct a fourth nuclear test. At the United Nations headquarters Friday, North Korea's deputy ambassador to the UN, Lee Tong-il, repeated that threat. He said Pyongyang would carry out a new form of nuclear test to protect itself from the U.S., which he says is, quote, hell-bent on regime change. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The United States has reiterated its support for Tokyo's efforts to bolster its military defense capabilities by announcing plans to send 2 more ballistic missile destroyers to Japan by the year 2017. Washington wants to help Japan counter North Korean threats and stand up to a more assertive China. Our UDN has the details.
U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel has welcomed Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's push for collective self-defense by altering Tokyo's war-renouncing constitution. Speaking at a joint news conference with his Japanese counterpart in Tokyo on Sunday, Hagel said Japan was playing a proactive role in contributing to global and regional peace and stability. In addition, Hagel announced plans to send 2 advanced destroyers equipped with ballistic missile defense systems to Japan in the face of a more threatening North Korea.
In response to Pyongyang's pattern of provocative and destabilizing actions, including recent missile launches in violation of UN Security Council resolutions.
The announcement comes a matter of days after Pyongyang test-fired 2 mid-range ballistic missiles into the East Sea, following a series of shorter-range missiles in recent weeks.
For the safety of Japan and of Eastern Asia, we believe that Japan's Aegis system and the United States Aegis system is very effective.
The extra ships will bring the total number of U.S. Aegis destroyers deployed in Japan to 7. Hagel also sent a message to China saying it should respect its neighbors, adding that coercion and intimidation will only lead to conflict. Hagel will be traveling to China starting Monday to talk to Beijing about its use of military power and encourage transparency. China has been bolstering its military while becoming more assertive in the territorial dispute with Japan in recent months. Yurian, Arirang News.
U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel will land smack bang into the middle of a diplomatic row between Beijing and Tokyo when he touches down in the Chinese capital later today. Our Hwang Sang-hee reports on how Washington is firmly taking Japan's side on territorial issues.
The United States is siding with Japan in a dispute with China that's brewing over historical and territorial issues. And the biannual Western Pacific Naval Symposium next month is shaping up as center stage. China has invited all participating nations to take part in an international fleet review where they can parade their ships, with one exception: Japan. Washington has said no American ships will sail if no Japanese ships do. This is not the first time the U.S. has been drawn into the escalating diplomatic row between Japan and China. Late last year, China sparked a trans-Pacific uproar by declaring an air defense identification zone, giving itself the right to identify and take military action against aircraft near the Japan-controlled Senkaku Island, which is also claimed by China. Washington defied Beijing by sending military planes into the zone unannounced. Whether U.S. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel will address the fleet review issue during his visit in Beijing remains unclear, but experts say China may not want Japanese warships in its waters because of Japan's occupation of China during the Second World War. Amid the regional spat, South Korea, a country also mired in a diplomatic dispute with Japan, is tightening its bond with China. According to sources Monday, Seoul's Financial Supervisory Service Governor Choi Soo-hyun met his Chinese counterpart in Beijing last week and agreed to bolster financial cooperation. In the past, South Korea had maintained closer economic ties with Japan. The two neighbors will also conduct a joint study of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of women through historical documents preserved in China. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott's week-long trip to Northeast Asia has begun, and so too has his ambitious drive to ink free trade deals with the region's biggest economies. The trip begins in Tokyo, where Abbott is scheduled to hold bilateral talks with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on this Monday. The two will be looking to come to terms on a bilateral free trade agreement that's been held up over imports of Australian beef. Abbott then arrives in Seoul for 2 days, starting Tuesday. He and President Park Geun-hye will sign their free trade pact that was reached in December of last year. The Australian leader finishes up his tour of the region in China, meeting with President Xi Jinping. Abbott is making the trip along with Australia's largest ever trade mission, underscoring Canberra's commitment to sign FTAs with Seoul, Beijing and Tokyo this year. Protecting the public's personal information was at the top of the agenda this Monday morning on the third day of the National Assembly's questioning session of government officials. Both ruling and main opposition party lawmakers asked whether proper measures have been taken in light of 3 massive leaks of private data this year alone, including the nation's largest ever in January. Finance Minister Hyun Oh-seok said the government was already taking appropriate measures and putting more pressure on companies to protect the public's data. Lawmakers from the opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy also discussed President Park's deregulation drive. They said removing too many regulations could undermine the economy, with the strong taking it as an opportunity to prey on the weak. Now, time for a look at the international headlines we're following at this hour. For that, we're going to connect live to our Eunice Kim, who's standing by at the News Centre.
Eunice, the world's largest elections have kicked off today in India. How many people are we talking about?
Well, Junju, some 815 million Indians are eligible to cast their votes in this round of elections. That's 100 million more than at the last elections in 2009. The polls to elect members of the country's lower house of parliament, the Lok Sabha, will take place in 9 phases over the next 5 weeks. The first phase already underway in the northeastern states of Assam and Tripura. The elections could be a game changer of sorts. Polls released last night showed the ruling Congress party, led by the Nehru-Gandhi dynasty, is likely to be served a blow following India's longest economic slowdown since the 80s. Meanwhile, the outlook is rosier for the Bharatiya Janata Party, led by Hindu nationalist leader Narendra Modi. it and its allies are forecast to grab the biggest chunk of the pie, that is of the 543-seat legislature, though they'll still likely fall short of a majority. The results of the vote expected on May 16th. Protesters in 3 eastern Ukrainian cities clashed with police when they stormed government buildings, raised Russian flags, and called for a referendum. Some 1,500 people participated in the Donetsk demonstrations, while in Luhansk, Ukrainian media said protesters pelted a government building with eggs and a firebomb. Ukraine's Interior Minister Arsen Avakov said in a Facebook post the so-called separatist disorder was ordered and paid for by Russia and ousted President Viktor Yanukovych. Acting Ukrainian President Alexander Turchinov called off his Lithuania trip on Sunday to plan a response in an emergency security meeting. Recovery teams crisscrossing the southern Indian Ocean will effort to verify ping signals that could have come from the black box of the missing Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 on this Monday. The British vessel HMS Echo, equipped with advanced detection gear, is surveying waters in which a Chinese patrol vessel picked up electronic pulse signals on 2 separate occasions Saturday, within a distance of 2 kilometers and a span of several hours. Australia's Ocean Shield is also investigating a possible third ping elsewhere in waters some 560 kilometers away. Time, though, is running out for the search that enters its 30th day today. The batteries of the black box are feared to run out any day now. The British children's TV show Teletubbies could soon be gracing the tubes of North Koreans. British media are reporting North Korea's state broadcaster Korean Central Television has cleared 3 BBC TV shows, Top Gear, Doctor Who, and Teletubbies, for air and is poised to purchase the rights to the shows. The decision comes after almost a year of talks between Pyongyang and the BBC. UK's Foreign Secretary William Hague hailed the development as a good way for the North to improve its understanding about the outside world. The BBC, though, has avoided comment as a contract has yet to be signed. North Korea's KCTV airs 6.5 hours of content every day. Foreign TV programs, though, so far have been strictly banned.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on Newsline at Noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
I'm Jin-ju.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in.
Now, back here in the nation, non-financial assets of Korean households make up more than 70% of all assets, and most of them are tied up in real estate. Statistics Korea data shows that real estate assets in particular accounted for around 68% of households' non-financial assets last year. That is down almost 2 percentage points from a year earlier. Experts say, unlike in the past when property prices continued rising, real estate may no longer be a profitable investment outlet. They caution that an asset structure that leans too heavily on property could have a devastating impact on household finances should prices go down. They rather suggest people sell some of their real estate to enhance financial liquidity for a stable source of income for the years after retirement. The number of Koreans using so-called budget phones now account for 5% of all mobile phone users in Korea. The Science and ICT Ministry says as of last month, over 2.8 million people were signed up on more economical phone plans that are about 30% cheaper than those sold by major mobile carriers. Ministry officials say the number of subscribers could surpass 3 million this month. Now, what makes these budget phones operators much more cheaper is because they borrow the network infrastructure from owners like SK Telecom or KT to lessen the burden of high cell phone bills.
The unemployment rate has been edging down in recent months, but Korea's younger generation continues to find it extremely tough getting on the career ladder. In a bid to create more jobs, the government and local organizations are showing the CEOs of the future how to get their own businesses off the ground. Our Kwon So-ah reports.
Starting one's own business is the dream of many young creative minds in the nation. And to help them achieve that goal, the Ministry of Education recently distributed a startup-friendly school system manual, which allows students to leave university for up to 2 years so they can prepare to set up a business and gives credits to those participating in startup-related activities. 15 universities already had such a system in place at the end of 2013, and the ministry hopes to raise that number to 95 by the second semester of this year.
It is difficult for students to start their own business in terms of time, money, and room. However, our school has special startup courses that connect us with venture companies, so we can do internships.
Black Box, a club on the Seogang University campus, has already trained over 160 students who are currently active with their own businesses.
Despite strong passions and various opportunities to receive help, young Koreans remain hesitant to jump into business. Why?
Social perception is a problem. People think it's a better path for university students to work for conglomerates.
However, people engaged in consulting at around 230 startup organizations for young people see a bright future.
Due to the many success stories nowadays, the social perception seems to be changing.
Readiness, a company founded last year, is one of those success stories. Its travel application now boasts around 10,000 users. However, the company needed a good push off the starting line.
The biggest concern for young entrepreneurs is seed money. We received that by winning a contest held by the Korea Tourism Organization. These days, the Korea Institute of Startup and Entrepreneurship Development provides us with manpower.
Apart from the cases of individual success, the government hopes that these businesses grow bigger, create more jobs, and kickstart a virtuous cycle. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Korean rhythmic gymnast Son Yeon-jae had a weekend she'll never forget at the Lisbon World Cup in Portugal. The 19-year-old finished first in the ball, clubs and ribbon events on Sunday, one day after becoming the first Korean ever to win the individual all-around. She leaves Portugal with 4 gold medals in total and 1 bronze from hoop. Son, who finished 5th at the London Olympic Games 2 years ago, is shooting to win multiple titles at the Asian Games in Incheon this fall.
Good afternoon, I'm Lee Ji-hyun with your latest weather forecast. Well, if you didn't have a chance to check out those fully bloomed cherry blossoms over the weekend due to the cold and windy weather condition, today should provide you a better opportunity as temperatures will jump back into their upper teens in most parts of the country, and Daegu should be the mildest place, seeing a high of 23 this afternoon. So it should feel more like spring today, and skies will stay mostly clear across the nation. But it's quite dry, and a dry weather watch has been issued in some regions, mostly areas down south, and also strong gusty winds have been swooping in parts of east with wind advisory still in place. Well, the weather outlook for this week is looking warm and nice, but please be aware of the huge temperature gap between lows and highs and dress accordingly to avoid getting sick. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The afternoon high here in the capital, Seoul, will rise to 17 today, while Daegu gets up to 23, and Gwangju and Busan should top out at 19 and 20 respectively later in the day. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like down in Jeju and Dokdo will peak at 17 and 19, and Mount Keungang should see a high of 16 this afternoon. Well, that's all I have for you today. Enjoy your lunch break and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
And with that very springy note, we're going to leave you now. Those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Mark and I will be back at the same time tomorrow. Thank you for watching.